The American Southwest is filled with legends. Some tell of lost gold hidden deep within desert canyons. Others speak of forgotten mines, buried treasure, and mysterious maps that vanished long ago. Most of those stories are little more than campfire tales, but every now and then a legend contains a grain of truth. And sometimes that truth leads to an adventure. This story begins in southern Arizona, where rugged mountains rise from the desert floor and ancient trails wind through canyons that have remained unchanged for centuries. It was there that a famous mystery had endured for more than 100 years. A mystery connected to one of the most recognizable figures in North American history, Pancho Villa. During the Mexican Revolution, Villa and his riders crossed thousands of miles of harsh terrain. They traveled through deserts, mountains, and remote borderlands where danger could appear from any direction. According to legend, Villa carried a specially made saddle containing a hidden compartment. Some claimed it held gold. Others believed it contained military secrets. A few insisted it concealed something even more valuable. Then one day, the saddle disappeared. For generations, treasure hunters searched for it. None succeeded. Most historians eventually dismissed the story altogether. But history has a funny way of hiding clues in places that others overlook. And when a clue surfaced during an archaeological research project, Secret Agent X knew exactly who to call. At the old boathouse beside the river, Grady Briggs, Cole Briggs, and Murphy were enjoying a quiet afternoon when the familiar chime sounded from the tablet sitting on the workbench. Murphy's ears perked up immediately. Cole looked up from the comic book he had been reading. Grady was already moving toward the tablet. A moment later, the holographic image of Secret Agent X appeared above the screen. The mission had arrived, and waiting on the other end was a young field operative named Rory, an archaeologist, a puzzle solver, and the only person who believed a forgotten symbol carved into an old stone trough might be the first clue to finding Pancho Villa's lost saddle. Within hours, the team would be heading south into the Arizona desert. None of them knew exactly what they would find, only that they were chasing a legend. And legends have a way of becoming real when the right people start asking questions. Treasure Hunter Files Fireside Stories, Pancho Villa's Lost Saddle. Chapter 1. The first clue. The hologram of Secret Agent X hovered above the tablet, flickering softly in the dim light of the boathouse. Grady and Cole stood on one side of the workbench. Murphy sat between them, his tail thumping against the wooden floor. On the screen beside the hologram appeared another face. A girl about Grady's age. She had blonde hair pulled into a ponytail and wore a tan field shirt with rolled sleeves. A notebook was tucked beneath one arm, and behind her stood shelves crowded with books, maps, and artifact cases. "This," said Secret Agent X, "is Field Operative Rory." "Hi," Rory said with a smile. "Hi," Cole replied. "Do you actually get to dig up treasure for a living?" Rory laughed. "Not exactly. That's what somebody who digs up treasure would say." Grady rolled his eyes. Cole ignored him. Secret Agent X cleared his throat. "Before Cole begins planning how to spend treasure he hasn't found, let's discuss the mission." The hologram shifted. An old black and white photograph appeared in the air. The image showed several horsemen standing beside an adobe building somewhere in the desert. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Then Rory pointed toward a stone watering trough visible near the edge of the photograph. Carved into the stone was a symbol: a horse, a star, and a crescent moon. "I found this while helping catalog historical photographs from southern Arizona," Rory explained. "That doesn't look like treasure," Cole said. "It's not. Then we're off to a terrible start." Rory grinned. "A few weeks later, I found the same symbol carved into an old watering trough on a ranch near the border. Secret Agent X expanded another image. The symbols matched perfectly. Grady leaned forward. That's interesting. It gets better, Rory said. She opened a notebook. Several sketches filled the pages. The symbol appears in 3 different locations connected to stories about Pancho Villa. Now Cole looked interested. The Pancho Villa? The one and only. Secret Agent X folded his hands behind his back. For more than a century, stories have circulated about a missing saddle that belonged to Villa. The one filled with gold? Cole asked. Possibly. Excellent. Or documents. Cole's smile faded. Less excellent. Or something else entirely. Cole sighed. I liked gold better. Rory laughed. The truth is nobody knows. The saddle disappeared during the revolution and was never recovered. Until now? Grady asked. We don't know that either, Rory said. What we do know is that the symbol keeps appearing in places connected to the legend. The hologram changed again. This time, a map appeared. Southern Arizona, northern Mexico. A web of old trails wound through mountains and canyons. One location flashed. A small ranch south of Tucson. The latest symbol was discovered here, Rory said. The ranch owner contacted a local historical society after finding it while repairing an old trough. Secret Agent X nodded. Which is why you 4 are being sent to investigate. Murphy barked. 5, Cole corrected. Secret Agent X smiled. Quite right, 5. A few minutes later, the mission briefing ended. The hologram vanished. The boathouse suddenly felt quiet. Cole turned toward Grady. Pancho Villa's treasure. We don't know it's treasure. It's definitely treasure. We literally just heard that nobody knows what it is. Cole pointed dramatically toward the ceiling. That's exactly what treasure wants you to think. Murphy wagged his tail. Even Grady couldn't help laughing. 2 days later, they were driving through southern Arizona. The desert stretched endlessly around them. Towering saguaros stood like silent guardians across the landscape. Red mountains rose in the distance beneath a cloudless blue sky. Rory sat in the passenger seat studying a map. Grady watched the road. Cole watched for treasure. Unfortunately, treasure proved difficult to spot from a moving vehicle. Murphy occupied the back seat and occasionally stuck his nose out the window. This place is amazing, Rory said. It feels different down here. It does, Grady agreed. The farther south they travelled, the wilder the country became. The towns grew smaller, the roads narrower, the mountains closer. By mid-afternoon they reached the ranch. An elderly man waited beside a weathered fence. His face was lined from decades beneath the desert sun. A broad smile appeared as they climbed from the vehicle. You must be the young explorers. That's us, Cole said. The rancher chuckled. My name is Mateo Valdez. He shook hands with Grady and Rory before kneeling to scratch Murphy behind the ears. Murphy approved immediately. Anyone carrying beef jerky usually earned his trust. Valdez led them toward a cluster of old buildings. Some were modern. Others looked as though they had stood there for generations. This ranch has been in my family a long time, he explained. My grandfather was born here. Did he know stories about Pancho Villa? Rory asked. The old man's eyes twinkled. A great many. Cole's attention sharpened instantly. Valdez laughed. I thought that might get your attention. They stopped beside a stone watering trough beneath a massive mesquite tree. The stone was worn smooth by time. Cracks ran across its surface. At first glance, it appeared ordinary. Then Rory stepped closer. There, the symbol had been carved into one side. A horse, a star, A crescent moon, exactly like the photograph. Grady felt a surge of excitement. The legend suddenly felt much more real. Valdez nodded. My grandfather always claimed the symbol marked places used by Villa's riders. You believe him? Grady asked. The rancher shrugged. I believe old stories deserve respect. Murphy suddenly stiffened. His ears perked forward. Then he pulled away from the group and trotted toward the far end of the trough. What is it, boy? Cole asked. Murphy lowered his nose, sniffed, then began scratching at the dirt. Everyone exchanged glances. Murphy usually does that when he's found something, Rory said. The dog continued digging. Dust sprayed behind him. Within seconds, his paws struck stone. A different sound echoed beneath the scratching. Tap, tap, tap. Grady knelt beside him. Partially buried beneath decades of dirt sat a flat stone slab. It clearly didn't belong there. Together, Grady and Rory brushed away the remaining soil. Something had been carved into its surface. Words, old words, barely visible beneath the dust. Rory carefully cleaned the stone. The inscription slowly emerged. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Cole read it aloud. Follow the rider where the mountain speaks. A gust of wind swept across the ranch. The desert suddenly felt much larger than it had before. Much older. Valdez stared at the inscription. I've lived here nearly 70 years. His voice was barely above a whisper. I never knew that was there. Rory looked toward the distant mountains rising along the horizon. A smile slowly appeared on her face. The symbol wasn't the clue. It was only the beginning. And somewhere beyond those mountains, the next piece of the mystery was waiting. Chapter 2. Where the Mountain Speaks. The next morning, the team was on the trail before sunrise. Cool desert air drifted across the landscape as the first rays of sunlight painted the mountains in shades of gold and orange. Murphy trotted ahead of the group, occasionally stopping to investigate an interesting scent before racing forward again. Cole yawned. I don't think treasure should require waking up this early. Treasure doesn't care what time you wake up, Grady said. It should. Rory laughed as she adjusted her backpack. The stone inscription they had discovered at the ranch occupied everyone's thoughts. Follow the rider where the mountain speaks. It was clearly another clue. The challenge was figuring out what it meant. Fortunately, Rory had spent much of the previous evening studying old maps with Mateo Valdez. One location kept appearing in local stories. A canyon hidden within the mountains several miles from the ranch. A place known for strange echoes. According to local ranchers, a person could stand in certain parts of the canyon and hear their own voice bounce back again and again from the cliffs. The location had a name, Talking Mountain Canyon. If I were leaving clues, Rory said as they walked, that's probably where I'd send people. Cole grinned. If I were leaving clues, I'd just draw a giant X. Good thing you aren't designing treasure hunts. I disagree. The trail climbed steadily into the foothills. The desert slowly changed around them. Saguaros gave way to oak trees. Rocky slopes replaced open flats. The mountains seemed larger with every step. Several times they stopped to compare their surroundings to Rory's maps. Each time, the evidence pointed in the same direction. They were heading the right way. By late morning, they reached the mouth of a narrow canyon. Towering stone walls rose on either side. A small stream trickled across the rocky ground. The air felt noticeably cooler. Murphy stopped and looked back toward them. His tail wagged. Then he disappeared into the canyon. Murphy, Grady called. The dog barked once. The sound echoed from the cliffs. Murphy, Murphy, Murphy. Cole's eyes widened. Okay, The echoes repeated. Okay, okay, okay. That's actually pretty awesome. The group entered the canyon. Immediately, every sound seemed louder. Boots scraping against stone, water flowing across rock, even their breathing. Everything echoed. Everything returned. It felt as though the canyon itself was listening. "The mountain speaks," Grady said quietly. Rory nodded. "I think we found the right place." They continued deeper. The canyon twisted and narrowed. Massive boulders blocked portions of the route. At one point, they had to climb over a fallen rock slide that looked decades old. Beyond it, the canyon widened unexpectedly. Everyone stopped. A small stone structure stood against the canyon wall. Time had not been kind to it. Part of the roof had collapsed. One wall leaned noticeably. Brush grew through several openings. Even so, it was unmistakably man-made. "What is that?" Cole asked. Rory stared at it. "A way station." "A what?" "A place where travelers could rest. Riders often use them in remote areas." Grady moved closer. "It looks old." "It is." Excitement crept into Rory's voice. "Very old." They approached carefully. The structure appeared abandoned for generations. Dust covered everything. Spiderwebs stretched across doorways. Pieces of weathered wood lay scattered across the floor. Murphy entered first. After a quick inspection, he decided there were no immediate dangers and sat down in the shade. Cole pointed. "See? Even Murphy thinks we should look around." Inside, the building contained only a single room. A stone fireplace occupied one wall. Wooden beams crossed the ceiling overhead. Most had survived surprisingly well. Rory examined the construction carefully. This could date back to the Revolution. Grady ran his hand lightly along the stone wall. Something caught his eye. A shallow carving. "Rory." She immediately crossed the room. There, etched into the stone, was the familiar symbol. A horse. A star. A crescent moon. The fourth one they had found. "Definitely not a coincidence now," Grady said. "Definitely not." Murphy suddenly stood. His ears perked. Then he trotted toward the rear corner of the building. The dog began sniffing intensely. Cole smiled. "I think Murphy found something." Again, the team gathered behind him. Unlike the symbol, this clue wasn't immediately visible. A layer of dust coated the wall. Murphy pawed at the ground. Rory crouched beside him and brushed away some of the dirt. More markings appeared. Not a symbol this time. Words. Old words carved carefully into the stone. The letters had faded over time, but they remained readable. Grady brushed away the last of the dust. Then everyone read the message together. "Where the echoes guard the rider." Silence filled the room. Even Cole didn't immediately say anything. The words felt important, older somehow, as though they had been waiting there for years. Finally, Rory broke the silence. "I've heard that phrase before." Grady looked at her. "You have?" She nodded slowly. "One of Mateo's stories." "What story?" Rory pulled out her notebook. "The legend says Villa's riders occasionally used a hidden cave somewhere beyond the canyon." Cole's eyes lit up instantly. "Now we're talking." The cave supposedly disappeared. How does a cave disappear? Nobody could find it anymore. Cole considered this. "Okay, that's actually better." Rory turned a page in her notebook. The cave had a nickname. Grady already knew the answer. "The Cave of Echoes." Rory smiled. "Exactly." Outside, a gust of wind swept through the canyon. The sound echoed among the cliffs. For a moment, nobody spoke. The pieces were finally beginning to fit together. The symbol, the ranch, the talking mountain, the abandoned way station, the hidden message. Every clue pointed in the same direction. Somewhere beyond the canyon was a cave, and if the legend was true, that cave might contain the answer to a mystery more than 100 years old. Cole adjusted his backpack. "So when do we go?" Rory smiled. Grady smiled. Even Murphy seemed excited, because they all knew the answer. The adventure was only getting started. Chapter 3. The Cave of Echoes. The next morning dawned clear and cool. The mountains glowed red beneath the rising sun as the team prepared for another day on the trail. This time, the excitement felt different. The first clues had led them to Talking Mountain Canyon. The canyon had led them to the abandoned way station, and the way station had pointed them toward a place that might not even exist. The Cave of Echoes. According to local legends, generations of treasure hunters had searched for it. None had found it. Most eventually concluded that the cave was nothing more than a story, a myth, an invention. But Grady had learned something during his time as a Treasure Hunter Files operative. Legends usually started somewhere, and the best ones often contained a piece of truth. By mid-morning, they were hiking deeper into the mountains than they had gone before. The trail had long since disappeared. Now they navigated through rugged terrain using Rory's maps and a handful of notes copied from old ranch records. The landscape grew wilder with every mile. Steep cliffs rose above them. Ancient oak trees clung to rocky slopes. Narrow washes twisted through the mountains like dry rivers. Several times they stopped to compare landmarks with the map. Each time, the evidence suggested the same thing. They were getting closer. Around noon, they reached the far end of the canyon. Ahead stood a wall of stone, hundreds of feet high. At first glance, it appeared to be a dead end. Cole frowned. "Please don't tell me the clue led us into a giant rock." Rory studied the map. "It shouldn't be here." "What shouldn't?" "The dead end." Grady looked around. The canyon walls were steep. The terrain offered no obvious path forward. For the first time since arriving in Arizona, uncertainty crept into the mission. Murphy, however, seemed completely unconcerned. The dog wandered along the base of the cliff, nose to the ground. Back and forth, following a scent only he could detect. Then he stopped. His ears perked. His tail stiffened. And he barked. Once. Sharp. Alert. Grady immediately noticed. Murphy found something. The team hurried over. The dog stood beside a tangled cluster of mesquite bushes growing directly against the cliff. At first, nobody saw anything unusual. Then Rory noticed a narrow gap behind the branches. Her eyes widened. No way. She pushed aside several limbs. Cool air drifted outward. The temperature change was immediate. A dark opening emerged from the shadows, half hidden by brush, almost invisible unless someone knew exactly where to look. The entrance to a cave. Cole's jaw dropped. Murphy found it. The dog wagged his tail proudly. Grady scratched behind his ears. "Good work, buddy." Murphy looked extremely pleased with himself. Rory shined a flashlight into the darkness. The beam disappeared into a tunnel that stretched deep beneath the mountain. A mixture of excitement and nervousness settled over the group. This was it. The place from the legend. The place hidden for more than a century. The place nobody had been able to find. The Cave of Echoes. They switched on their headlamps and stepped inside. The temperature dropped immediately. The air felt cool and damp compared to the desert heat outside. Their footsteps echoed softly through the tunnel. Each sound bounced off the stone walls and returned seconds later. The effect was strange, almost as if unseen voices were following them. The passage sloped downward, twisting gently through the mountain. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. Tiny droplets sparkled in their lights. "Okay," Cole whispered. "This is officially awesome." His voice echoed back. "Awesome, awesome, awesome." Murphy trotted ahead confidently. Every few moments he paused to make sure the others were following. The tunnel widened, then widened again. Eventually they entered a large chamber. The ceiling rose high overhead. Massive stone columns stretched from floor to ceiling. The cave felt enormous, ancient, silent. For several moments they simply stared. Then Grady's light landed on something near the wall. A curved piece of metal, partially buried beneath dirt and stone. He knelt beside it. A horseshoe. Rory immediately joined him. The metal was heavily rusted. Old. Very old. Nearby lay another, and another. Excitement surged through the group. Someone had definitely used this cave. Not recently, but long ago. Exactly when the legend suggested. Rory carefully examined the area. Near the horseshoes she discovered fragments of leather, bits of old rope, and the remains of what appeared to be a long extinguished campfire. "People stayed here," she said. Grady nodded. "The question is who?" Cole pointed deeper into the chamber. "Maybe the answer is over there." Everyone turned. At the far end of the cavern stood a shape partially hidden in shadow. Rectangular, wooden, unmistakably man-made. Their hearts began racing. Slowly they approached. The object became clearer with every step. A chest. Dust covered its surface. The wood had darkened with age, yet somehow it remained intact, waiting. After all these years, waiting. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Cole whispered the question everyone was thinking. "Do you think it's really?" "Maybe," Rory replied. Grady carefully knelt beside the chest. The metal hinges were rusted, but still attached. The lock had long ago corroded away. Whatever secrets the chest contained had remained hidden for more than 100 years. Until now. He looked at Rory. She nodded. Together, they slowly lifted the lid. The hinges groaned. Dust drifted into the air. The chest opened. Everyone leaned forward and froze. Inside was no gold, no silver, no piles of treasure. Instead, resting carefully within the chest, lay an old saddle. The leather was worn but remarkably preserved. Beautiful craftsmanship covered every inch. Even after all those years, it was obvious that the saddle had once belonged to someone important. Then Rory spotted something. The symbol. A horse. A star. A crescent moon. Carved into the leather. Her breath caught. The saddle. Nobody needed to ask which one. They all knew. Pancho Villa's lost saddle. The legendary artifact that treasure hunters had searched for across generations. They had found it. Murphy barked excitedly. The sound echoed through the cavern. Found it. Found it. Found it. Cole grinned. Best dog ever. Murphy wagged his tail. Then Rory noticed another detail. A narrow seam hidden beneath one side of the saddle. Almost invisible. She carefully reached toward it. A hidden compartment. Cole's eyes widened. Now we're talking. Slowly, Rory opened the compartment. The team leaned closer, expecting gold, jewels, coins, something. Instead, they found bundles of folded papers tied neatly with faded string. Letters, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The excitement in the room shifted instantly. Confusion replaced anticipation. Cole blinked. Letters? Rory carefully removed one bundle. The paper was yellow with age, fragile, delicate, history held together by little more than luck and time. She unfolded the first letter carefully. Spanish handwriting covered the page. A second letter contained a list of medical supplies. A third described a family fleeing violence during the revolution. A fourth warned of danger, approaching a small village. The deeper they looked, the more they realized what they had discovered. The saddle had never carried treasure. It had carried messages, hope, warnings, supplies, news. The things ordinary people needed to survive during difficult times. For a long moment nobody spoke. Finally Grady looked around the cavern. The hidden cave, the lost saddle, the forgotten letters. The mystery suddenly felt much larger than treasure, much more important. And as Rory carefully held one of the century-old letters beneath her light, they all realized the adventure wasn't over. In many ways, it was only beginning. Chapter 4. More valuable than gold. For several minutes, nobody said a word. The cave of echoes seemed quieter than before. Even the distant dripping water sounded softer, more respectful, as if the mountain itself understood the importance of what had been hidden there. Rory carefully returned the letter to its bundle. Her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, from excitement. "This is incredible," she said. "It changes everything." Cole looked down at the stack of letters. "I'll be honest?" Grady smiled. "That's usually dangerous. I was expecting treasure." "You still found treasure," Rory said. Cole tilted his head. "I'm not completely convinced." Murphy sat beside the chest and wagged his tail. The dog seemed pleased, regardless of what they had discovered. Rory carefully examined the inside of the saddle. The hidden compartment contained dozens of bundles. Some were tied with string, others with strips of faded cloth. Each represented a message carried across dangerous territory more than a century earlier. People had trusted those messages to riders who crossed deserts and mountains during a time of war. The thought gave Rory chills. Then Grady noticed something. "Wait." He pointed toward the bottom of the compartment. "There's something underneath." Everyone leaned closer. Partially hidden beneath the last bundle of letters sat a small object wrapped in cloth. The fabric had yellowed with age. Carefully, Rory lifted it free. The bundle felt surprisingly heavy. "What is it?" Cole asked. "I don't know." Slowly, she unfolded the cloth. A silver medallion rested inside. Sunlight would have made it gleam. Even in the cave's dim light, it shimmered softly. Intricate designs covered both sides. An eagle, a horseman, several stars, and in the center, the same familiar symbol they had followed across the desert. The horse, the star, the crescent moon. "Now that's treasure," Cole whispered. Rory laughed. "It might be." The medallion was beautiful. Unlike the letters, it looked valuable. The kind of object collectors would pay a great deal of money to own. For a moment, everyone simply stared at it. Then Rory carefully wrapped it again and placed it beside the letters. "We'll need to document everything." Cole nodded, but his eyes lingered on the medallion. The team spent another hour exploring the cave. They photographed the saddle, recorded the location, made notes about the artifacts. By the time they emerged from the mountain, the sun had begun its descent toward the western horizon. The desert glowed gold. Long shadows stretched across the canyon floor. It felt like the perfect ending to a successful day. At least, it should have. But as they hiked back toward camp, something continued bothering Cole. He wasn't entirely sure why. The letters were important. He understood that. The saddle was an amazing discovery. He understood that too. Still, he kept thinking about the medallion. It wasn't like the other artifacts. It felt different, special. By the time they reached camp, the thought was still stuck in his head. Later that evening, the team sat around a small campfire near their tents. Dinner was finished. The stars had begun appearing overhead. Murphy slept beside the fire. Rory reviewed photographs on her tablet. Grady organized notes. Cole poked at the flames with a stick. Finally, he looked up. "What happens to the medallion?" Rory glanced at him. "What do you mean?" After this, she shrugged. "It'll probably go to a museum." "A museum?" "Most likely." Cole stared into the fire. "A museum? Thousands of visitors. Locked behind glass. Never touched. Never owned. Just displayed." An uncomfortable thought crept into his mind. What if someone wanted to keep it? Rory immediately looked up. "So nobody else could see it?" Cole shrugged. "Maybe." Grady studied his brother carefully. "You mean if they found it?" "Maybe." The fire crackled. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Rory set down her tablet. "When archaeologists discover something important, we become caretakers." "Caretakers?" She nodded. "The artifact belongs to history." Cole frowned. "Not the person who found it?" "No." "Why not?" Rory picked up a small stick and drew a circle in the dirt. "Imagine someone found the only surviving page from your favorite comic book." Cole immediately looked concerned. "Okay. What if they decided to keep it hidden forever?" "That would be terrible." "Why?" "Because nobody else could read it." Rory smiled. "Exactly." She pointed toward the mountains. "The medallion isn't important because someone owns it." She pointed toward the cave. "It's important because of the story it tells." Then she pointed toward the bundles of letters. "And because it helps explain the people connected to those stories." Cole looked thoughtful. Very thoughtful. The kind of thoughtful that usually meant a lesson was sneaking up on him. He wasn't sure how he felt about that. Later that night, long after everyone else had gone to sleep, Cole lay awake in his tent. The stars shone overhead. The desert was quiet. Yet he kept thinking about the medallion. What if nobody had ever found it? What if it had remained hidden forever? Then nobody would know its story. Nobody would learn about the riders, or the letters, or the families who depended on those messages. The more he thought about it, the more he understood what Rory meant. The discovery wasn't about ownership. It was about preservation, about protecting something so everyone could learn from it. The next morning, they packed camp and began the trip back to the ranch. As they walked, Murphy trotted happily beside them. The mystery was solved. The saddle had been found. The letters had survived. And history had been recovered. Cole glanced toward Rory. "You were right." She looked over. "About what?" "The medallion." A smile appeared on her face. "Don't sound so surprised." "I'm still getting used to it." Grady laughed. "So is everybody else." The group continued down the trail. Ahead, the desert stretched toward the horizon. Behind them, the Cave of Echoes remained hidden within the mountains. Its secrets finally revealed. Its story finally told. But the greatest discovery wasn't the saddle, or the medallion, or even the cave itself. It was the realization that some treasures are too important to belong to just one person. They belong to everyone, and protecting them is sometimes the greatest adventure of all. Chapter 5. The Greatest Treasure. 3 months later, Grady, Cole, Murphy, and Rory stood together inside a museum in southern Arizona. The building wasn't large, but it was full. Families filled the exhibit hall. Teachers guided groups of students from display to display. Historians spoke quietly with researchers, and nearly everyone had come to see the same thing: Pancho Villa's lost saddle. The discovery had attracted attention across Arizona and northern Mexico. News articles had been written. Historians had studied the letters. Experts had spent weeks carefully preserving every artifact recovered from the Cave of Echoes. Now, for the first time, the public was seeing the collection. Cole stared through the glass display case. The saddle rested in the center of the exhibit. Its leather had been cleaned and preserved. The familiar symbol was clearly visible. The horse, the star, the crescent moon. Nearby sat the silver medallion. Its intricate carvings gleamed beneath the museum lights. Visitors crowded around it. Some pointed. Others took photographs. A few simply stared. "I knew people would like the medallion," Cole said. Grady smiled. "Of course you did. It is shiny. That's not why they came." Cole looked around. Grady was right. Most visitors weren't standing near the medallion. They were gathered around the letters. Dozens of them had been carefully displayed behind protective glass. Translations accompanied each one. Stories accompanied the translations. Stories of families, villages, teachers, farmers, children, people who had lived through difficult times more than a century earlier. The exhibit felt alive, not because of the artifacts, because of the people behind them. Rory joined them near one of the displays. "Want to hear something amazing?" "Always," Cole said. She pointed toward a nearby family. An elderly man stood reading one of the translated letters. Beside him were his children and grandchildren. The man looked emotional, almost overwhelmed. His great-grandfather wrote that letter. Grady looked surprised. "Seriously?" Rory nodded. The historians traced several names from the collection. The elderly man carefully touched the glass. A smile spread across his face. Then he began telling his grandchildren a story. The children listened intently, completely fascinated. For a moment, the museum disappeared. The exhibit disappeared. Even the crowd disappeared. All that remained was a family reconnecting with its own history. Cole watched quietly. Then he nodded. "Okay." Rory smiled. "Okay, what?" "I get it now." "You get what?" Cole looked toward the letters. "The treasure." Grady folded his arms. "This should be good." "No, really." Cole pointed toward the family. "If we had taken the medallion and left everything else hidden, none of this would have happened." Rory smiled. Now he truly understood. The saddle had been important. The medallion had been valuable, but neither compared to what the letters represented. The letters gave people something priceless: their stories back. A museum guide approached the group. "Would you like to see something?" The team followed her to a wall near the back of the exhibit. Mounted there was a large photograph. The Cave of Echoes, the saddle, the letters, and standing beside the discovery were 4 familiar faces: Grady, Cole, Rory, and Murphy. Cole grinned. "Now that's a good picture." Murphy barked. The guide laughed. "You 4 helped preserve an important piece of history." Rory shook her head. "We just followed the clues. Sometimes that's enough." The guide moved on. The team remained where they were, looking at the photograph, looking at the exhibit, looking at everything the adventure had uncovered. Finally, Grady spoke. "You know what I think is interesting?" "What?" Rory asked. "The legend wasn't wrong." Cole looked confused. "There wasn't any gold." "No." "There weren't jewels." "No." "There wasn't a secret treasure chest." "Also no." Grady smiled. "But there was treasure." The group fell silent. because they all knew he was right. The treasure had simply been different than anyone expected. Not something to spend, not something to own, something to protect, something to share, something valuable enough to survive more than 100 years. A little later, the museum began closing for the evening. Visitors slowly headed toward the exits. Lights dimmed throughout the building. The team paused one final time beside the display. The saddle sat quietly behind the glass. The letters rested nearby. The medallion gleamed beneath the lights. Each artifact had completed a journey that began more than a century earlier. And because people had chosen to preserve them rather than possess them, their stories would continue long into the future. Murphy sat beside the display and looked up at Grady. His tail thumped once against the floor. Grady smiled. "Ready to go home, buddy?" Murphy barked. That sounded like a yes. Together, the team headed toward the exit. Outside, the Arizona sky glowed with the colors of sunset. The mountains stood dark against the horizon. Somewhere out there, countless mysteries still waited. Forgotten stories, hidden clues, lost treasures. The world was full of adventures for those willing to seek them. And as Grady, Cole, Rory, and Murphy walked toward the parking lot, they all knew one thing for certain. This wouldn't be their last, because every treasure has a story, and every story is waiting for someone brave enough to follow the clues. The end.
Sunken ruins, deep and old, stories whispered, yet untold. Through the jungle's emerald screen, unseen wonders intervene, dusty scrolls and cryptic lore, calling us to distant shore. A thrilling quest, the die is cast, shadows of a fabled past. Adventure's breath, a wild desire, setting every soul